Hey, Daddy, it was the Ark of the Covenant that Indiana Jones was after, right?
Yeah.
Well, all that effort he went to wasn't really necessary.
What do you mean?
It's available on a warehouse deal. Except the seller is someone called Area 51, and they don't get very good feedback.
From 1981, it's one of my all-time favorite films, Raiders of the Lost Ark, starring Harrison Ford as Indiana Jones. And not only did I get to watch this film, but I got to watch it in such a cool way because the CBS Sunday Night Movie has come back. And they've even used a variation of the original movie night theme music and graphics. And Raiders of the Lost Ark was what they broadcast last night. So when the Sunday Night Movie music came up in the graphics, I got all excited. Like when I was a kid, and I thought, oh, I get to stay up late and watch a movie, even though I'm an adult now. And it was great. I had a lot of fun with this. This is the second Indiana Jones film that you've seen. You've seen The Last Crusade because it was out in theaters, and it also was the one that was most age appropriate for you to see. And, you know, we made sure that we weeded out the intense scenes for you guys watching this. But it didn't seem to bother you. I think you still enjoyed it.
Mm-hmm. I really, really liked this movie. I liked Indiana Jones. He was by far my favorite character. I also liked Marion, who's the other lead. I really liked the beginning when he's like kind of in this temple. I really liked that part. When it's the very, very beginning, I think it was a little bit slow when they were just like walking around. But I really didn't care because eventually it picked up and there were a lot of moments where you kind of needed to like remember and it would all make sense to you in the end. And so one of the things that I thought that I might have had to remember was the sand, when he put the sand in the bag. And he put the bag in there in place of what he's looking for, like
the idol.
Yes,
right.
And I really liked it. I liked especially when they got to Egypt. I really liked that part, especially Marion there. I liked how the monkey would climb on her and stuff. And there were a lot of funny moments. And then it like really went, and it went really fast. And I really liked it. And you even said that eventually it would be picking up the pace like real quick. And I thought, yeah, it might. But I don't think this is too slow either, just at the very beginning.
No, it's got a lot of good set pieces in it. Now, you mentioned the beginning of the movie where they're walking around. And that's the opening MacGuffin is how they kind of term that. And we get introduced. You have to remember, you guys have grown up in a generation where Indiana Jones is iconic and he's a part of modern mythology. This was the first film, and this is how Indiana Jones was introduced to audiences. So you never saw his face at first. You know, he's examining the map, then from the back he hears the pistol cock, and you see him twist his head just a little bit, and then he brings out the whip and you see him. You learn so much about his character without ever seeing his face. The way they introduce him is very unique, very cool, and very effective. And that was Steven Spielberg and George Lucas, you know, working together. Their partnership was really strong here, very creative. And Harrison Ford was just starting to explode. I mean, he'd already portrayed Han Solo twice, but this was a leading character, very different than anything we'd seen before. And he burst onto the scene at this point. And I remember talking about when we reviewed The Last Crusade, Harrison Ford looks great for his age at every age. But I remember looking at The Last Crusade and he looked so much more seasoned at that point than he did in this film. He's so young here and he's got so much energy, and it's not that he didn't have it in The Last Crusade, it's just hard to explain because he was so new on the scene in some ways. Even though we knew him as Han Solo, he was new and this was different, and it was very cool. You also mentioned Marion, and this is another great example of George Lucas creating a great female character who's not a damsel in distress. Just like Princess Leia, Marion doesn't need to be saved. She can save herself. And that's really cool, and I think that's kind of neat for you know, to see that kind of a heroine or a female lead in a movie. Both of those franchises benefited from that type of character, and I think that worked out well. And like you said, the set pieces, you know, there's a lot of fast-moving, action-packed scenes here. Lots of stuff going on. You brought up the monkey, and that was another great thing. That monkey was used, that's not CGI. That's a real monkey. It's a trained animal, and they use it for comedic effect and also to move the plot, and they do so very well.
I was kind of confused because it looks like a real monkey, but it was so well in this movie. It worked really well, and that's kind of really...
It's sort of amazing that they're
right.
able to get an animal to do that kind of stuff.
And I really liked all of the scenes. I bet one of my favorite scenes would probably be when he's in the temple with the snakes on the floor and that part. I really like those scenes but there's a lot of action in all of the other ones, so I don't really know why I like those ones. I think it might be like creepier, but not creepy.
Right. I mean, it's fun because you're kind of visualizing what he's going through. Like, how would I react to that? You know, how would I deal with that? One of the things that's so effective in this movie is the humor. I mean, Harrison Ford can really deliver the humor as Indy very well. It was written very well. So while it's an old school adventure serial, it's definitely a modern take on it. So it's got, you know, great effects, great stunt work, great set pieces, but you got a great leading man who's able to deliver comedy. Marion is also able to deliver comedy. I love the thing where he's looking in the mirror and she's looking at the other side of the mirror, and she swings the mirror and cracks him in the jaw, and you hear this scream. They do the exterior of the ship, and you hear the scream out in the ocean, and she leans around the mirror and goes, did you say something? I mean, the two of them are great. They play off of each other great, and you know, there's so much good in this film. I have heard it criticized. There was a famous director, I can't think of who it was, that said that this film began the downfall of the film industry because it's all stunt work and action pieces with no plot. I disagree with that. I think there was a plot here. I think it was clever. It was also a tribute to the Saturday morning serial that, you know, you would go to the movie theater and see. So I think there's a lot more going on here. I don't agree with that criticism. I guess I see where they're coming from in some ways, but it doesn't hold true for me. I think he's a great hero. I think it's a great story. I think it's a fun time at the movies for me.
I really liked this movie, and I think that we actually went to Disney World and we saw the stunt show, and I recognized a lot of these scenes with that stunt show, and that was like really cool.
And Colton did too. Colton said, oh, this is the part where he knew what was going to happen because he'd seen that stunt show, and they do a great job with that. And that stunt show's been running for years and years, and it's still packed every time you go. Every time I've ever gone there, and I've gone many times, it's still packed. It shows you how popular a hero Indiana Jones is. And while we're here for a minute, you know, the last film was called Indiana Jones and the Kingdom of the Crystal Skull, and it did not get a lot of love. A lot of people had issues with it for different things, but some of the criticisms were, you know, let's take the nuke the fridge scene. You know, how could he survive a nuclear bomb by getting in a refrigerator and this, that? Okay, I'll give you that. But you watch this film, which everybody loves, he swims over and he gets on a submarine. How does he know that that submarine is not going to submerge for miles and miles and go, you know, 400 feet underwater? What's he going to do if that happens? How did he handle that? And at the end, after the Ark deals with all the Nazis and the lid comes back down on the Ark, and Marion and Indy are there together. They're on, you know, the Isle of Gibraltar. How did they get back to the United States with the Ark? We don't question those things because we love the film. I think we've become a society that likes to critique and question and pick at every little thing in a movie instead of just sitting back and enjoying a movie. And when you watch this, you certainly could pick at that stuff, but why? You know, I remember sitting there watching it with my godfather in the movie theater the first time I ever saw it. I went and when Indy goes under the truck. Remember the segment where he comes off the front of the truck and he goes underneath, and then he's got the whip and he's holding it. And he's sitting next to me in the movie theater going, oh, that's virtually impossible. And I'm thinking, I'm just sitting there wide-eyed going, this is the greatest thing I've ever watched, you know? I mean, Lucas and Spielberg got it. They played to the kid in all of us. And sometimes I think we forget to be a kid when we watch things that are meant for kids in some ways.
I I really liked this movie. I think it was action-packed. I really liked Marion. I loved Indiana Jones. I liked his friend in Egypt.
Salah.
Yes.
John Rys-Davies, who comes back for Indiana. You saw him in Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade, too. He was the one with the camels. And I remember you liked the part with the camels.
That was really fun. I liked all of the characters in here. I liked the characters as bad guys. The bad guys.
Yeah, the actors who played the bad guys were great, and
Right.
they weren't your typical bad guy either. I mean, they had little variations on the theme of how they would play that. And I love one of my favorite parts in the whole thing is when the guy who got his hand burned, right? So that's how they had the headpiece to the Staff of Ra. He comes into the tent where Belloc and Marion are. And he takes out this thing, and I remember in the theater, I thought it was like some kind of torture device, right? It's got the chain and everything else. And then he folds it into a hanger. And you could tell that Belloc and Marion felt the same way we did in the audience. And there's just this moment of relief and then a big laugh. Actually, you laughed because of the whole thing. So many clever things here, and it never went the way you expected it to. Every time you thought it was going to turn right, it turned left. And it wasn't to subvert our expectations. It's just because it was creative and it was great storytelling and great writing. I mean, all around, this one for me was a seminal piece of cinema because it changed things in a lot of ways. And I think, it celebrated what had come before, but it pushed into the future and pushed the envelope to create new things too. So not many movies can say they did that.
And all of the movies today really don't have that. I remember there was Onward where they had that one part with like the big green cube and stuff, which I liked. That was basically the only part I liked. But every movie I've really seen isn't like Indiana Jones at all, except for maybe some of the old Star Wars.
Agreed.
But Indiana Jones, I think, is really creative and really cool, and I think it's really fun to watch.
I agree. And the thing is, and of course, it's my youth. So I'm going to be nostalgic for it, and I'm going to be a little jaded, I'm going to be biased toward it, I guess. But I put it to you this way. I've seen Raiders of the Lost Ark 20 or 30 times. We watched it last night. I'd watch it again today. In a heartbeat, I would sit down and watch it today. But Avengers Endgame, you see that movie once, and it was slow moving for me the first time because the first 2 hours of Avengers Endgame took forever because we all knew where it was going. Then you got to the end, and the end was good. The last hour was good. I have no desire to see that film again because those first 2 hours are going to take even longer to get through, and I already know what's going to happen at the end and exactly how it's going to play out.
Right.
And I don't, even though it was that's also a unique achievement in cinema because they brought all those different storylines together over 10 years. So I'm not taking anything away from that. I just don't think it's going to have the replayability that Indiana Jones does because there's simple, good script writing there and great characterization and just a unique type of formula that works. Whereas the other is more paint by numbers for me a little bit.
I don't even know what to say. Indiana Jones is really good, and I think you should definitely watch it. And if you like it, I think you should maybe try it again and see if you still like it. And if you do, then I think it's a really, really good film.
Yeah,
and I already know it is.
And there's supposed to be an Indiana Jones 5. They keep pushing it back. And, people are very critical because, they're saying Harrison Ford's going to be in his 80s when this thing is out. You know what? Patrick Stewart's in his 80s playing Jean-Luc Picard and still playing him effectively. People age. That's part of life. In the TV show, which is considered canon, Indy supposedly lives to be 100 years old. So let's see what they do. As long as he plays his age and doesn't try to play younger, it's not one of these Roger Moore as a, almost nearly 60-year-old James Bond trying to look and act like he's 30. As long as it's not that, I think it's fine because people age and you got to let them do that. All right, last take.
See it, definitely.
Definitely still see it. Holds up, and I think it always will.